So what I want to do here is now start with the drums, like I was mentioning earlier. And the most important part of the drums is the kick. So I'm going to start with the kick drum, and I'm going to cycle at my chorus, mix everything to the drums. So let's get the drum set mixed properly, and then we can mix the bass in with the drums, the guitars in with the drums, the synths and keys in with the drums, and the vocals in with the drums, and then we'll add all the atmospheric stuff. And that's the process that we're going to run through. What we're looking for here is to get our levels properly, so we know that throughout our session we hope to have enough headroom. So how we're going to do that is we're going to solo our kick and just see how loud it is. So we have our kick at the bottom here. We have no effects on it. So that's a dry kick, just a kick sample that I have, and it's without anything, it's at a negative 3.6. So what I'm going to do is add my effects, my EQ, my compression, and I'll add some reverb. And that's all I'm going to do on my kick. First thing is EQ. I'm going to add this Pro Q2 EQ, and you can use the Logic EQ by clicking on here, and it's the same, more or less the same thing. I do enjoy using the fabfilter EQs because of the you can solo frequencies, and that's really helpful. And I also like the interface a lot more than the Logic EQs. So I'm going to turn this on, and I'm going to get rid of the Logic EQ, and I'll show you what I've done here. So on the kick, I've cut out about 39 at 39 hertz here. Sorry. So let me just play the kick now. And so I'm just shaping the kick a little bit here. I don't need those. You can see the low end of the kick doesn't even reach 39. So I'm not losing anything of the low end. I'm just cutting those frequencies out so that won't affect my compressor at all. And then I've done a low shelf here. This is just bumping 2 dBs to get that low end punch. And then I've dipped at 1000. Let me solo this so you can hear what that dip is. And I could bring that up even a bit more like this. That the very subtle changes in each track will add up to big changes at the end. So doing things like this is important. And then I've just done a big high cut here at 8000 hertz to just take all that high end that I don't need and that you won't hear. So if I did that quickly for a Logic EQ, for anyone using Logic EQs out there, this would be kind of a similar thing. Let me turn this fabfilter one off and do a Logic EQ here. So similar thing. The numbers are over here, so it was about 39, 34, like something like that. And then this is the high shelf here. We turn that on. You can like bump frequencies up like that. So about a 2 bump here. And then I did the bell shape around 1000. And then I did a cut here, a high cut. So similar shape. This is what it would look like in the Logic EQ. So I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to turn my Pro Q2 EQ back on. So that's EQ. And the fundamentals of EQ are really narrowing in on the frequencies that you want to take out and narrowing in on the frequencies that you want to increase. Because as we progress throughout our tracks, using EQ will help us place each instrument and each section of each instrument in a place that you can hear them, and that we don't want the kick. We don't really want to hear the high ends of the kick. We want that space to be for the the hi-hats and the vocal and other areas. So we can go through each track and kind of give them a shape where they deserve to be. Well, now with EQ, what number are we peaking at here? So we're at a negative 1.1. Cool, that's still fine. Let's add some compression. So I use the FabFilter Pro C2 compression. You can also go in here and go to Dynamics Compressor, Stereo, and you can use, these are really good compressors as well. And you can use, the vintage FET, the vintage VCA, all these are really good compressors. You can also go in and use a preset, which the presets are really strong too. So this is the classic VCA preset in Logic, and you can do the same thing that I'm doing here with a Pro C2 compressor. I'm using a preset. It's called the Punchy Rock Kick 01 BM preset. And so this preset, let's play with the preset, what it sounds like. So my threshold is negative 24. My ratio is 5:1 more or less. I have a fast attack and more or less a really fast release. And I have done the auto gain off, so I have more control to where how much more I can bring up. So I like compressing my kicks a lot, almost to negative 10. And right now it's about a negative 8 compression. So when you're compressing a kick, you want to look at this number here, or on the Logic compressor, you want to look at this needle here. And let's do it with the Logic so you can kind of see what I mean. So let's open up that classic drum compressor and see what that sounds like. So it's kind of getting up to negative 11 here, right? More or less. It's a really hard compression. Our threshold is at negative 23. It's more or less the similar parameters here. See on the Pro C we have negative 24. We have negative 23 here. We have a 5:1 ratio on the Logic, a 5:1 ratio. So very similar presets. The auto gain is on here, so we can turn that off, and then we can do our own makeup of the auto gain. And so what the compressor is doing is like compressing the signal when it gets too loud, but then we can also make up the gain on our own. And that's why I like to turn auto gain off. We want to control how fast the attack is and how fast the release is, which means like when will the compressor start more or less, and when will the compressor go back up. And that's why I like the FabFilter compressors, because when I play this, you can see it really in action. So let me turn the Logic compressor off, the Pro C2 back on. And so when I increase the release, it will come up faster. This will be more of a V shape. Let me show you the difference. If I do a slow release, see how it kind of comes up a bit. And now the red is like loop dipping and slowly coming out. Now if I do a fast release, it's going to come back up quickly. So that's the release. Let's compress around negative 8 to negative 10, and we want the makeup gain. So this bar over here, this negative 0.7, we don't want that to go above 0. So that is good. That's all we want for compression. Next thing is to add a bit of reverb to your kick, and we can bus out the reverb. Bussing means like you're sending, you have a reverb on a different track, and we're going to add little bits of our kick to that reverb. How we would do that from scratch is to go to this bus. We'll click an empty bus. Bus 5 is empty. All these are empty as well. So let's go bus 5, and then we would go. This is our bus output on the right side of the inspector. So they look the same. So this track, this kick, is going to this track now. It's being output here where we can apply more effects. And then it's going to the stereo out track. So on the bus, we want to add the reverb. And I like to add the Valhalla vintage verb. And here you choose a reverb that you like for your kick. You probably want a reverb that doesn't have so much of a decay, and just stick with the presets here. I'll show you what I like to use on my bus 1. I had a Valhalla vintage verb, a plate reverb, tight plate preset, and the color is under now. We have 1970, 1980s, and now. So I like the now color. So that's the verb, and just gonna remove this and turn on my bus send, and I've sent -18.2. So let's have a listen to that. What I recommend when you're adding reverb, just over exaggerate it till you really hear it, and then pull it back until you think it's good, and then when you think it's good, pull it back just a little bit more. So let's over exaggerate, listen to our kick. I'm going to add about, I'm going to actually put about -22 now, listening to it again. You never really want the kick reverb to be noticeable, because you do want the kick really up front and dry in the mix, but you want to put it in some type of space. It does help. So that's all the mix in terms of effects we're going to do on our kick. And now we're going to level our kick. We're going to turn it down until we have enough headroom where we can mix all our other instruments around it. So I've just put it down to -5, and then let's see what we're peaking at. So -6, that's pretty good. I might just drop it to -6 here and then see where we're peaking at. -6.9, so that's really good. And it's now got quieter in my headphones, and so how I can balance that out is I'll just turn my headphones up a little bit. So it's still loud, but not too loud in my headphones. And it's at an appropriate volume that you can mix things around. Because that's the danger when if you start mixing really loud, then you can't really go anywhere from there because you don't have any headroom on things. So it's important to start your foundation to have enough headroom where you can build things around. And you don't have to mix at loud volumes. I would recommend not mixing at loud volumes because, for one, it's bad for your ears, but also it will just make your ears tired faster. So we've done a kick. We're now at a -6, and we're going to now pile everything on top of that. So let's go to the snare next. Have a listen to our snare. And right away, we can just immediately level the snare down to where it fits with the kick. Okay, that's good for now. And let's start adding our effects. We're going to add an EQ again. And on this EQ, I've done a low cut. I'll do the same on the Logic EQ. So I've done a real low cut on the snare, because this snare has that, up until about 400 or 500. Don't really want that low end of the snare, and I do want a bit of a boost right where the snare has a bit of a kick here, where that punch of the snare is. You can see it in this frequency here. If I bump that up, you can really hear it. I want that clap snare to be noticeable, so I'm going to bump that up. I did a bit of a dip on the super high ends because I really want this to be the focal point here. So I did a bit of a bell or a bit of a low cut there, just to drop some of that annoying hiss out. Now let's add a compressor, and we'll add some reverb as well, and that's all we're going to do for effects on our snare. So let's add the Pro C2 compressor, and like to compress the snare a lot as well. Do a similar type of style of compression. Let's have a listen. Well, let's turn this on. So we're compressing here at about a negative 9.9. We have a really fast attack. We have a slow release here because we do want a bit of that kind of decay of the snare to shine a bit. And then 4:1 ratio, 4.6:1, negative 21 threshold with auto gain off, and I bumped that gain back up to -1. So now we'll add reverb. I use the same bus. I'm on my small Valhalla vintage verb. I'm using the same reverb that I did on the kick, but I did put a little bit more. I put negative 13.4, and you can add a bit more reverb to your snare as you would to the kick, because it's nice to, the snare can really give away to what room you're in. So that's what it sounds like with the reverb, and the reverb can also make the snare sound bigger too. So let's now play the kick and the snare together, and we'll mix the kick, or sorry, we'll mix the snare with the kick. So this would be too loud, and this would be too quiet. That's good enough for now. Let's do the hats next. So let's take a listen solo on our hats. Let's add some EQ on the hats here. I'll bring up a Logic EQ and show you what I did. I removed pretty much all the low end because I don't want that low end of the hat there. So you can see without it, now with it, I found some of these frequencies to be a bit harsh. So a bit of a cut, low, high shelf there. So that's all I did for EQ. I added a compressor. It didn't really do much. Just had the compressor on there. Just a small compression, and I bumped that up to negative 4.4. Just so it is popping through the mix. And then added the same reverb on this. I did a negative 23. Same Valhalla vintage verb. So you can see a lot of it. Really sounds bigger and more space. And now let's mix the hi-hats in with our kick and snare. So this would be too quiet. This would be too loud. This is just, I'm just listening, trying to get a feeling. It's all about feeling. Okay, so that's good enough for now, and we're gonna come back to it and we'll level it when we hear everything in context a bit, but we're just trying to lay the foundation with everything. Let's mix the crash in. We just have one crash hit at the beginning of the chorus here. And you'll notice I am just starting out with the chorus on everything. And I'm gonna mix the chorus because it is the loudest part of the songs, and then I'll take a listen to the verses and the whole song in context as well, but I'm going to start just with the chorus. So what does the crash sound like? Simple crash at the beginning of the chorus. I'll add some EQ. Again, I took out a lot of low end here, and I did a nice high shelf to really let those high ends really shine through. And then I put a compressor on there, not much compression at all. And took that out. Actually want that auto gain off, and I'll bump the gain up, compress it a bit more, lower the threshold, faster attack, and about a faster release. That's pretty good. So that's going to shine through. Now I'll add my reverb. Oh, this is a different reverb. This is going out to bus number 2. Where I call it church, and that is like a large kind of, think of it like you're in a big church, and so the space is much bigger. And I like to put the crash on a bigger space because I really want that longer decay reverb. So if I open up, I can show you. It's the Valhalla Vintage Verb again, and it's still a plate reverb. It's a large plate with a longer decay. It's 4.36 seconds. So you'll noticeably hear the reverb because it lasts for longer. And so now I will mix the crash in with everything that I've done so far. That would be too quiet. This would probably be about right. So that's good enough for now. And that's all we have for our drums. We just have kick, snare, hats, and crash for the chorus section at least. And it looks like we have some snaps and snares in the verse section. So let's leave it like that for now. And we'll snap up the drums. We'll solo the drums. Okay, so this is what everything sounds like. Let's do some vinyl leveling here if we need to quickly. Cool. So the last thing I want to do to our drums group is I want to put a compressor on everything, and also I want to add some more distortion and more reverb. This drum track is going to, I've bussed it out to bus 3. Let me show you this, what it looks like on the mixer. Maybe that will make a bit more sense visually. So I did command to open up my mixer. Scroll to the right here, and these are where all your buses are. And so this is my drums bus, the one I was talking to you about right here. And I'm going to add all my kick, my snare, my hi-hats, and the crash. They're all coming to this output. The full track is coming to this full output here. So distortion will give your kick a lot of punch, and will give your whole drum set a lot of punch, and more compression will glue things together. And then I like to add just a touch of reverb to put it in the same space. Distortion, it's called Decapitator. It's by Sound Toys, but you can also use a stock distortion in Logic, and you can choose how much drive you would like and the tone of the drive, and where what signals the drive is affecting. I've added a preset called a high crispy mix, and I've increased the drive a bit, and I've lowered the low cut. So this is what the kick sounds like with the distortion off, or the whole drum set I mean, and this is what the whole drum set sounds like with the distortion on. So definitely a lot more punch to it. Distortion is a nice mixing technique to add to a drum bus or drum output. The other alternative is just you add distortion on every other element a little bit here, but that's the benefit of kind of taking a group of tracks and putting it to one output and just adding the distortion or any other effect on that track instead. I will also add another compressor on this drum output just to glue everything together. That on. And I'm not going to compress it as hard as I did the kick or the snare. I'm not going to have that drop down to -10 on with the compressor. I'm going to have that about -5, -4. It's still a decent compression, and I'm going to lower the gain, the dry gain a bit, just because I can see I'm going over there. I'm peaking at 1.5 there. So that's good. -4.5 compression. We're not peaking. It's a slow release, a slow attack. We can increase the attack a bit. The ratio is not over. We're compressing about 3.6 to 1 and a low threshold, -15. Let's now add a bit of reverb to everything. I'm going to add that plate reverb again, and I'm just going to put it about -28. Not very much, but just have that kind of sit in the same room. So here's exaggerated. And we're just going to pull that back. crash is pretty loud. I'm going to lower that crash. Let's take a look at, after we've put all our effects on it and everything, where how much headroom we have for the rest of our mix. So this is the drums bus right here on the right. That's where all the drums are going to. So let's see where we're peaking at in this channel. So negative 0.9, that's very little headroom to no headroom at all. So I'm not going to lower, what I want to do is lower the level, but I won't, because I like the mix right now, I'm not going to play with any of the instruments yet. I might come back and change them, but well, from right now, I'll just change the output signal. So I'll drop that down to -5, or negative 4.4, which gives me a -5 peak. And if that sounds, after you're doing this and you drop it down, it just sounds too quiet in your headphones, then just bump up the volume to give yourself a relative decent volume to mix with.